of who are viewing who don't know much about you, can you give us just a quick little overview of who you are?
Sure. I'm the CEO of Realty Executives, Cooper Spransey, which is a real estate firm in Madison, Wisconsin. We have around 60 agents. And then I coach our agents here at our firm in Madison. And then I also have a podcast called Onion Juice Podcast, which is geared to helping real estate agents, both our agents in our company, but other agents in Madison and around the country, and actually around the globe. I'm being listened to in Australia quite a bit too. So yeah, just all about helping real estate agents grow their business.
Awesome. I love that. So what has kind of been, I guess, your let's just start. What has been your biggest learning experience when you actually started a podcast?
I got past the fear of calling it the Onion Juice and having a weird name, and then getting all of the equipment lined up, which I made it way more difficult than it needed to be. And then what was the content that people were really looking for? And so once I got past all of that, it was kind of smooth sailing. And I look back on it, and I was thinking, what was I worrying about? What was I so hesitant to do? And I had like a good 3 to 6 month delay beyond my launch date because I had all that fear. So.
It amazes me. I hear that so often that people just, for whatever reason, have that hesitancy to actually get started. I've seen it with clients who are, paying me a monthly retainer, our company a monthly retainer to produce episodes, but they just are hesitant to produce kind of that first one and really just launch it out there. It's amazing.
Right. Yes. I'm right there with them.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it's just, I don't know, almost a fear of kind of putting yourself out there to be open to those critiques.
Right. Definitely. Well, and you just get this worry that what you're doing or what you're, I started out with a weird name, right? Like I wanted something tangible. But yet I'm professional and I'm representing a company, right? And not only am I representing the company's business, but we have agents that have individual businesses as well. And so I'm representing a lot of companies with this weird name. But I knew that if I called it the Realty Executives Podcast, that nobody would listen to it. And so the Onion Juice is a weird name, but that weird name gives it some context. And now all of my listeners call themselves juicers, and it's something tangible that they can hold, and it's something that forms this tribe of other weird people. So.
No, I think that's awesome, and I like just kind of the story you have of why you chose that name. I just think it's really cool, and it's a great way to start attracting the right people, which is what we're going to be talking about here today.
Awesome.
So Neil, when we talk about trying to actually attract the right people to you, what is kind of the foundation of that? How do you go about doing that?
Well, the first thing is to know your audience and know what your audience wants. For me as a real estate agent, people are not as interested in real estate as I am, right? And if I'm going to put out content that's about mortgage rates and about inventory and absorption rates and all these things that we as realtors geek out about, they're not going to be interested in it. And so you have to give them content that they're interested in. And the sweet spot that I found was that people are interested in my city, the city that I serve. And to be the digital mayor, we were talking about this, before going online here, is, being the digital mayor. It's something that Gary Vaynerchuk says. And really what the purpose of this is to interview the business owners, interview the lady that's lived in the neighborhood for 50 years and can remember when all of this was just cornfields and has these great stories, interviewing the chief of police, interviewing just things that are going on inside the city and using the city as your content. And then what this does is this attracts people that like the city like you do, and they get to see your personality. They get to see your whoever you are, they get to see that, and it starts to build this trust before they even meet you.
No, I think that's awesome, and that's that trust building factor is so huge, because that's kind of that first step in bringing people into your world.
Right. And that, I mean, if you can get somebody to trust you online before they ever meet you, you're just setting yourself up to success. Because what I've learned is that people would rather, that's the most important thing that they're looking for when they're hiring a professional, is they want to trust the professional. And so if I can establish that trust online by being myself and maybe being even a little vulnerable. Vulnerability is missing from a lot of people's marketing approach. And if they're a little bit vulnerable, that starts to form this trust between myself and the consumer.
So when you say vulnerability, what exactly are you talking about? Like, how vulnerable should people be? What should that actually look like?
You have to find a balance. I've gone as far as disclosing that I had a marijuana addiction and put it out there because I wanted to serve a certain group of people that I was interacting with, and it was around addictions. And I've been sober from drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, all that good stuff, all that bad stuff for 7 years now. And I would even put things out there like that because I knew that if I did, I was going to speak to a certain person that was really struggling with this, that maybe was a professional like me and was covering everything up, and then I could serve them. So that's, I think, one side of it. And then the other side of it is just making fun of yourself. You know, I had a situation once where it was in the middle of the winter. I was wearing boots and my left shoelace got caught in the right shoelace hook, you know, those little hooks at the top of the boot. Yeah. My left shoelace got caught in my right boot and I went flying right in front of my clients. Papers went flying. I was walking up to show them a house. So, I mean, telling stories around that and making fun of yourself puts this little piece of vulnerability out there, but that allows people to say, that is funny, and I think it's great that he shared it. I like this guy. I'm going to remember him when I go to buy or sell a house.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I think you got to find that balance though.
Yeah. Is there a too far the one way that you can actually turn people off if you're too vulnerable?
Yeah. I mean, I don't like when we're talking with my addictions. I often will. I remember there was one time I was given a keynote speech in front of a couple hundred people, all professional realtors. It was a white tablecloth event, and I was talking about attracting business, and I was giving all kinds of ideas, and I got talking about vulnerability. And in that talk, my telling people how vulnerable to be, I didn't even have it in my notes, but it came out. And it was just that right moment, and I just felt the spirit move me, and I wanted to share it. After the event, I had 3 people come up to me. One of them is currently struggling. 2 of them are recovering alcoholics, and just thought it was amazing that I did it. And that's who I was talking to, right? That's who I wanted to affect. But then I also got feedback. I got an email from somebody that said they couldn't believe that I did that. And that it wasn't professional, and they did it in a nice way, but it was just like, I just can't believe they did that. And then later that person emailed me back about 2 weeks later and apologized because they finally got why I did it and why I shared that. So that, I mean, there is that too far, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't ever want to tell somebody to be that vulnerable. But I also want to encourage people that vulnerability really, really attracts people. And so many of us think that we have to be perfect and polished and have it all together and fake it till we make it. And I'm sorry, but that just doesn't cut it today. People can see right through that. They want to see who you are, and then that attracts them to working with you.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think that's one of the reasons why like live video is so is taking off so much is because it's a little more authentic. It's a little more vulnerable. People are a little more on the wire. You see more of their natural personality versus highly edited, highly scripted, other types of content.
Right. Yep. It's exactly it. It's just, you feel like you're with the person and you get to see all the little quirks of that person. And that's that human element, right? That's that's what attracts us. So, yeah.
So besides vulnerability, what are some of the other next steps, other things people need to be thinking about in order to really attract people to them?
Another point that I like to teach on is this convincing versus compelling. So a lot of us are always trying to convince people to work with us. And if we're being media companies that happen to sell whatever it is you sell, if you're being a media company and you're attracting people, you're going to compel people to work with you, and you're not going to have to convince them. And so many of us have this sales approach where we're always trying to convince people. And if we can get our businesses to the point where people are just compelled to work with us, maybe they ask a few questions before they hire us, but they just know, I want you. You're my guy. I want you to be the one that's going to help me, either coach me or I want to come to your company because of what you're doing. If you can get your approach to the compelling portion versus the convincing, you've won. And so that's what I always look for is by being authentic, by being vulnerable, I end up compelling people to work with me.
Oh, that's cool. So how have you used that within Onion Juice and your real estate company? Can you give us some examples of ways you've started to compel people towards you?
Yeah, share all. Share all is the biggest thing. I mean, just sharing every little tip, every little thing that I learn. And the thing is that most people that listen to every little tip, they're going to use 5% about what you talk about. And so many of us are like, I'm only going to share this with my certain clients. And I'm going to protect this and only give this information to my clients. That prevents you from attracting people. So the more you share, the more you give out, the more people are going to attract to you. So that, I think, share all is so important.
Well, and I just know one of the natural things people might be thinking about is, okay, what is too much? How much should I be sharing? I need to sell a lot of our listeners sell their information. So I need to, create a course, do things like that. Where's that balance there?
What I've found in my course, so I launched a course for real estate agents that originally started inside of our company. It's called Roundbox, and now I'm selling it nationwide as a benefit of our company owns the whole thing. And so what I have learned is that most of the content, the teaching that I'm selling in Roundbox is not obvious. It is obvious. It is somewhat elementary, but it's how it's packaged and how it all goes together as a system that makes it powerful. So let's say that I have 5 pieces of my coaching program. If I talk about all 5 pieces individually, it will help certain people at certain times. But when it's all packaged together and ran with a system, and ran with a community around it to help you through each piece, that's what they're buying from me. It's not the content. It's the system and it's the community that they're buying from me. So I'm going to use all the content and all those 5 pieces. I talk about each individual one throughout all of my podcast over and over and over. But it almost gets to the point where it's so confusing that you need to buy the package so that you get the system and you get the community.
Yeah, I think that's so perfect. And just to clarify, you're not necessarily trying to make it confusing by any means, but you just don't have the time to dive into every single element of that system in one podcast episode or even in a couple of episodes.
Yeah, and because you give them everything, but then they'll take some of this information and they'll have 10 questions about what to do with it. Yeah. And when they're in community, then that's where they get the answers. And so I think selling a course along with a community aspect is what they're paying for. I mean, that's what they're truly getting.
And how do you go about actually creating that community? I know we were talking just before we hit the record button or the go live button,
Yeah.
that you are starting to really grow your Facebook community for your podcast. How are you actually creating community both in the course and then with your podcast?
I just simply started a Facebook group, and I started every episode talking about the group and encouraging people to go join the group. I started out just, the first 200 people were all realtors because I focus on having only realtors in the group. The first 200 people were with realtors that I was already friends with. And so, I started the group, and right away I had 200 people. And then I have encouraged others to invite people to the group. And another way too is to have a contest, give away something for people that will invite other people to the group. I haven't done that yet, but that's an idea that I'm going to implement soon here. And then empower the group. So I pour a lot of value into the group so that the people in the group keep coming back to the group and want to be a part of it. And then now doing interviews, Facebook Lives with other people inside the group has been powerful as well.
Yeah, I really like that approach where you're actually pulling people from the community and having them share their advice with the community. I love that.
Right. And the community, to me, it's been fascinating. I'm about 3 months into my group, and we've got over 600 people in it now, all realtors. And it's fascinating to me how it just continues to grow, how people just continue. This morning there was 4 different posts on the group. I'm feeling like I always need to pour value into it, and I always need to create content. I don't. I could ignore the group for a month and it would still do great. Don't do that, but I could.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what is some of the ways you're creating some of that engagement, creating like what you said you're pouring value into the group? What does that look like for you?
One is just commenting on posts and answering questions. Another is I do a weekly podcast, so I have content that I'm using for the content. What I've been doing on the group, and people appreciate it, is before the episode comes out on Monday, I'll talk about it the week prior, and I'll prep them for what's coming, and then I involve the group. Like I have a Q&A session that I do every 10 episodes, and I post on there who wants to be on the show, who wants their question answered on the show, and I'll get anywhere from 10 to 20 questions every time I do that episode. And then once the episode's posted, I tag everybody on there and says, "Hey, I answered your question. Listen to episode 90 or whatever, And so just involving the group has been so powerful.
No, I think that's awesome. So what do you actually do? You said you like prep the group for what the podcast is going to be coming. How are you doing that? Are you doing that on a written post? Are you jumping on like a Facebook Live? What's your approach for that?
A combination of all of them. Facebook Live, I think, is my favorite. But sometimes what I'll do is, hey, I have so-and-so coming up on the episode next week. Do you have any questions for them?
Nice.
Or I'll play the guess who's going to be on next week. I can't wait for you guys to hear this. Guess who the guest is, and that's funny because you get all these random guesses, and and just doing different things like that. I don't ever do one thing the same. I try to switch it up.
No, that's awesome. That's so cool. So what else do people really need to be thinking about when it comes to actually attracting people?
I think what some of the benefit of attracting business that a lot of people don't understand is that it's fun, and that producing content and documenting your day and being real and interviewing people and all of this is a really good time. I enjoy it. You get to be an artist. Who doesn't like being an artist? And we all are artists. Some of us don't think we are, but we all have art inside of us. So by being an artist, it's so enjoyable. And then the other benefit of all of this is that it really prevents burnout. If I was to chase business all day long, I would burn out and I wouldn't like my job or really who I am. And so by attracting business, I have fun. and I prevent that burnout, and I enjoy it. So I think that that's some of the benefit of the attraction model versus the chase model. And I just wanted people to get over that hump of believing that they're artists and that they can do this.
So for you, what does being an artist really mean? What does that kind of look like?
It's constantly thinking of ways to create content. And some of us are great on video. I always said I have an amazing face for radio. Some of us are big into podcasting. Some of us are great writers and should be blogging daily. And so it's just finding your art. I love to write. I love to create content and be a thought leader. And so I get my kicks out of that. I really do enjoy that. But I have found that I'm really, really good on mic. Like if I'm on the radio or if I'm on a podcast, that's my sweet spot. So I've poured all of my ideas into a show. And I love Wednesdays when I record my show. Like I get giddy about it. And I don't even care so much about the results because I just enjoy it. And that, then when you attract people, that's even more enjoyable. The other thing too with the attract approach is it does have a little bit of a chase in it, because when if I'm a local realtor and I'm doing a show and I go to interview the business owner that I'm interviewing, let's say he owns a restaurant, and I interview that restaurant owner, there's a little bit of a networking that goes on there. And that power happens because now that person's going to share your episode. And also, if that person ever goes to buy or sell a house, they're going to remember you because you put a spotlight on their business for them. And you did a show around their business. And they're going to remember that. So there's that. That's the beauty in being an artist, is that it does have a little bit of a chase component to it.
I think that's so awesome. And really, it's just such a great way to network. It's a great way to build that community. You're building the community in multiple ways. You're building it with the people you have on the show. You're building it with your listeners. I think it's so awesome and so important.
Yeah. And I see it time and time again. People just keep coming back and saying, the guy that I interviewed 3 months ago just wanted to sell his house with me. Like, I didn't even think about that happening. Yes. That's the beauty.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. So I know we were talking a little bit about finding the way you create art, whether it's writing, whether it's on mic, whether it's on video. Have you found, I'm kind of leading you down the way because I know what I think, but have you found that there is a consistency that's needed?
Oh, yes. If that's what I built my coaching program around, is that two most important things in running a business is to have a clear plan and what you're going to do, and then stay consistent with it. So my coaching program helps agents develop a clear plan by having a 3-pillar approach. So what you're going to do to stay in touch with your sphere of influence, what you're going to do to chase, and what you're going to do to attract. And so then we build that clear plan, but then consistency is so important. I often call myself a consistency coach, and talking people off the ledge of chasing shiny objects. They'll be doing something one month and it's working, or maybe it's not working quite to their expectations, but then they see another agent doing something else, and now all of a sudden they want to change their plan. So yeah, consistency is so important. And it's hard to stay consistent, because if you launch a show and 8 people listen and 4 of them are family members, it really hurts, right? Yeah. It really hurts. And it's really hard to keep going. But every person that I've seen that keeps going, they eventually break through. And sometimes it's 18 months before they break through. I coach an agent down in St. Louis. His name is Bob Wall, a great guy. He will admit that his first few episodes, I joked with him. I'm like, Bob, would you just smile? Like, it's just so quirky. You're on camera and you're not even smiling. Like, he's just a real dry kind of, just never smiled. I'm like, just give the camera a smile. But here's a guy that it was not his thing. It was, he knew the strength in it, but he really struggled. And it was that vulnerability that has started to attract people. Now he's up to episode 50. He's about to do his 1 year episode, and he's getting business. He just had somebody call him last week, an old college mate that's been seeing all of his videos, and he wants him to be the realtor. So it takes time, but Bob went through this season where he wanted to give up, and because it was like he had 10 people watching, and it was really difficult. Now today he's got over 1,000 friends on his Facebook, or 1,000 likes. He's getting tons of views on his YouTube video, and it's working. So you just got to stay consistent.
Oh, that's such good advice. And it can be so hard sometimes, though. But yeah, it's so important.
Right.
So Neil, what has maybe been your biggest frustration, your biggest challenge in this whole process?
I think ignoring the haters and getting people that doubt what your plan is. And I have a vision for my podcast that it grows this community that is so large, and that people want not only to listen to the show, but they want to come work with me at Realty Executives, and they want me as their coach. And I think getting everybody on board with that thought, especially when my show is called the Onion Juice Podcast, is a real difficult thing to get across. And so ignoring the haters, and sometimes they're not haters, but sometimes they just don't understand your approach and will have little pokes and jabs at you that can really knock you down. I've become a Taylor Swift fan throughout all of this because of her song, whatever, I forget the name of the song, but people are going to hate, whatever, and I'm truly not there's a soft side to me. All right. I do like Taylor Swift a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? It's like that song to me is the song that I replay in my head quite a bit when I do get haters, or when I do get people that doubt what I'm up to. And that's been my biggest struggle with all of this.
How do you actually go about insulating yourself from some of those haters and from that, just letting that drag you down?
Yeah, I've been in the past, if somebody's confronted me about it, I've had a really healthy conversation with them and explained my point of view, because often they don't understand my side of it. They don't understand what I'm doing. And then I've done my best to just realize that it's just that I'm just going to get questions like that, especially in my role as a CEO. I'm going to get questions like that. And so I've surrounded myself with really strong leaders, other strong leaders, and have relied on their support in a lot of it. And through that, I've gotten stronger. When it first came out, I was pretty weak. And now my skin's getting a little thicker, and I'm able to roll a little bit more.
No, that's good. That's good advice. So what is your biggest piece of advice for someone who is just getting started with a podcast, or has an idea that they might want to go this direction?
Sure. Beyond hiring you, I would suggest that they just... Yeah.
I'll give you your 5 later.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks. I would suggest just doing it, and don't procrastinate, because I spent way too much time thinking this stuff through. And if I would have just launched right away, I would have been 6 months ahead of schedule. And instead of now being 1 year into my show, or a year and a half into my show, I'd be 2 years into my show. And so just go. And don't worry so much about your equipment. I think I geeked out way too much about my equipment. Your listeners are not audio snobs like we become as podcasters. And so I'd suggest just getting started. You can always improve as you go. So, I mean, the equipment that I have today is my dream equipment, but I started with a Yeti USB mic in my Apple, my Mac computer. So I started there, and now, I got a full studio, and I've got great editing software. And actually now I don't even do my own editing anymore, which is even better.
Yeah, that's always nice when you can outsource that piece and just focus in on what you love. Well, and that actually is a great point. Because I know we were just talking about this before we hit record again, that you've kind of evolved into a position where you get to do what you love all the time. How did that kind of come about? Do you have any suggestions for people to get to that place?
Yeah, I think just as the show grew, an audience, I was able to establish a sponsor. And so having that sponsor gave me funds where I didn't have to talk my wife into it or talk my business partners into investing in Onion Juice Podcast. I was able to take money that I was getting from a sponsorship, and then that allowed me to invest in better equipment. That allowed me to invest in show notes. That allowed me to invest in somebody to edit my show. The crazy thing is that it took me like 6 months to even let go of the editing. There was like this fear around it. And now that I have an editor, it's like I spend 1 hour a week on my podcast now. And I used to spend 4. And so it's so nice now to just let things go. But I couldn't have done that in the beginning because of the cost.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that's perfect. It's just a slow step up. And then now that you're able to spend less time on the podcast, you can start focusing in on the community, on creating your course. Like you're able to spend more time serving in different ways.
Right. Definitely. Yep.
I think that's awesome. So Neil, if people want to learn more about you, to look at your course, find the podcast, where's the best place for them to go?
Real simply, if they just want to text the word OJ Group to 44222, that'll send them a link to everything to dial in with the Onion Juice Podcast and listen to that show and be a part of the group. So just text the word OJ Group to 44222, or just look me up at onionjuicepodcast.com or neilmathweg.com.
Awesome. Well, Neil, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate it, and I think our listeners got a ton of value from it.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me, Nick. It was a blast.
That's it.